What percentage of the state is homeless?
These are open-air drug scene. That's the right word for it. Homeless encampment is a euphemism. The thing that's really driving it in terms of what the politicians think and the activist nonprofit groups and the people providing the services is victimhood ideology.
What percentage of the state is homeless?
It's a great question. It's around 100,000.
100,000 homeless?
Yeah, around 100,000. And it's not a consequence of poverty. It's a consequence of addiction, and untreated mental illness to some extent. But the basic picture is you get addicted to hard drugs, you stop working, you overstay your welcome with friends and family, you lie, steal, and cheat. The family's then confronted with, what do I do? Do I continue to enable the addiction, or do I evict them? You evict them and then they go live on the streets. These are open-air drug scene. That's the right word for it. Homeless encampment is a euphemism. These are very, very sick people. I mean, methamphetamine, I mean, meth is worse than speed, is worse than cocaine. Fentanyl is worse than heroin, worse than alcohol. And then they're combining them, and they're very cheap. They're synthetic. They're made in labs. They're very addictive. Fentanyl is a wonderful thing if you're going to have back surgery or if you're going to give birth to a child and you need that immediate relief, short-term relief. But boy, for addicts, it's absolutely the worst. And so you get a lot of death, a lot of overdose. It's fundamentally a medical mistreatment that leaves people on the streets. It's not we need more housing. The rents are definitely too high, but it's not like people can't afford the rent and they go live on the street. It's They get addicted and their lives fall apart and then they go on the street.
When did you see this really start to take off?
I first visited California when I was 15, so that must have been 1986, around there. And we saw mentally ill people on the streets. The first wave of homelessness in the 80s was a combination of releasing people out of mental hospitals without proper care in the community, combined with the crack epidemic. And it was usually crack and alcohol, the combination of those two drugs. And that was the first homeless epidemic. And I would see people on the streets in San Francisco, and my parents were psychologists, so they were able to explain these are folks with mental illness. And then you'd have the question of, why are they all on the streets? Why are they not getting care in hospitals or in group homes was the idea. But we didn't have the laws in place to require people to stay in their homes. And so they would go out onto the streets. And California is a more extreme version of other parts of the country. And I should say, it's not the only thing going on. I mean, the more temperate weather means you can sleep outdoors all year round. So in Boston and New York and colder places, people come inside. But we don't see this in places like Florida or warmer states. And so it can't just be the weather. Some of it is I mentioned the Big Lebowski, the Big Lebowski culture. Mm-hmm. It's kind of take it easy, man. You might remember, it's like, hey, you like to drink White Russians and rosé. They like to smoke meth and fentanyl. It's a kind of relativism. It's, some of it's stuff I love about California taken to an extreme. It's a very libertarian culture. Like, you should do your own thing. But when that leads to addiction or untreated mental illness, then you sort of get these really destructive and self-destructive behaviors right there in your backyard. But I think the most important thing, the thing that's really driving it in terms of what the politicians think and the activist nonprofit groups and the people providing the services, is victimhood ideology. Mm-hmm. And victimhood ideology is this idea that you can divide the whole world into victims and oppressors, that if you're a victim, you're always a victim. Nothing you can really do about it. All you can do is kind of ameliorate. You can get a little bit of help, but you can't become a hero. I talk about the process of recovery for recovering addicts or alcoholics or the typical recovery. It's a heroic process because you are suffering. You are in a bad way, and you overcome it, not by yourself. You have a sponsor. You go to AA or 12-step or whatever. You go through rehab. But ultimately, the idea is everybody has the potential to become free and to become in control of their lives. And this is a a very empowering, it was a very liberal idea in as recently as the 1960s with the human potential movement. It was the best of the liberal positive psychology movement. It's 12-step, it's human potential. That's been taken over by a much more very radical left wing, very extreme, and very, think of Misery with Kathy Bates in it, that kind of energy of a kind of, I want to care for you in that really creepy, dark way.
Yeah.
Where I want to care for you so much I'm going to hurt you. So it's almost Munchausen syndrome by proxy, which is when parents will poison their children so that they can take care of them. I'm not saying that this is quite what it is. The best way I could say it is sort of pathological altruism. Might coming from a good place. I want to help other people, but it becomes pathological because if you really want to help someone, then you need to help them to become independent and free. If you're just trying to keep them dependent on you by enabling their addiction rather than helping them to get into recovery, then you're maintaining their victimhood status. Mm-hmm. And that is basically the underlying problem behind the homelessness problem in California.
Do you think that there is, it sounds like you get rewarded for being an addict in California.
100%.
We talked about the allowances.
Yes. Free house, I'll give you a sense of it. In Birmingham, Alabama, they did these experiments in the 1980s. All homeless addicts, mostly crack addicts, would get stay in shelter at night in we call it congregate shelter. They'd all be in the same area. And once you're there, everybody wants their own room. That's one of the first things people want. They want some privacy, understandably. They made it, if you pass a drug test, then you can have your own room. Mm-hmm. You go up to your own room and you like it. You're better. You have a reward for good behavior. What happens if you fail your drug test? Because people relapse. It happens. It's often part of recovery. You don't go back on the street, but you do go back to the congregate shelter. This is called contingency management, so that your rewards are contingent. So it's carrots and sticks. I'm a big admirer of how they handle this in Amsterdam. Amsterdam is this incredibly liberal city, right? Prostitution's legal. Marijuana, you can buy it at the coffee shop. Mm-hmm. But they had these big open drug scene of heroin addicts. And it was this typical thing. The very liberal, supposedly more caring people wanted to just enable and help, and they didn't want to require anybody to clean up their act. Finally, they said, it's got to be carrots and sticks. You got to have rewards for doing the right thing and consequences for doing the wrong thing. Because if you don't have consequences for bad behavior, then you're going to do more bad behavior. Mm-hmm. So you're a dad and I'm a dad, and anybody that has kids know that if you don't have any consequences for bad behaviors, you don't have to spank your kids. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be always super harsh, but there has to be some consequence for engaging in self-destructive or destructive actions, and then some reward when you're doing things on your path to recovery. And that's how you sort of get people up towards recovery. And you have some one step forward, one step back, and two steps forward, but it's pretty simple. But we just took away all the sticks in California. It's all just carrots. And if it's just carrots, then they're actually not carrots. People start to feel entitled. I'm an addict, I'm on the street, I'm homeless, give me an apartment. Well, no, you should have to earn your apartment if you're getting an apartment.
Do you think that there is some type of an agenda behind they're incentivizing people to use?
Yes.
Is there an agenda behind that? Or is this
like an ulterior agenda?
Yeah. Does it go deeper than that? Because to me, that's common sense.
Hey everybody, I'm Shawn Ryan. Click here to subscribe to the Shawn Ryan Show YouTube channel for the hottest and most compelling interviews that you will not see anywhere else. I've also made a playlist of all the previous SRS episodes so they're easy to find. You can find that right here.